Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome once again to Change the Questions, the show where we take a single question each week and pick it apart with great scrutiny and aplomb. My name is Paul Laporte. Joining me as always is my co-host Mike Miner.
Hey guys, scrutiny, really?
I don't know.
Great scrutiny?
I really do need to think of a better intro for this show.
No, I can probably think of a few. Nah, you know what? No, you keep going.
Okay, well, we're past the intro. This is not... The people are not listening for the intro for this program.
No,
they're not. They're listening for the topic of discussion, and the question we are going to answer today is, should WWE export their wrestlers? Now, you may be a little bit confused by this question, so let me go ahead and clarify this. Throughout history, it has been commonplace in certain promotions to loan their talent out to other organizations, usually around the world, usually in another country, in Japan or England, something like that, Mexico. So their talent can get experience somewhere else, learning a different style, working with different people, and then when they come back, then they just have that much more in their skill set that company can then use. The question is, should WWE do something similar? Should they take a person who is not really being used right now, like Tyler Breeze, we'll say, for example?
That's the first one I was thinking of. That's weird.
Take Tyler Breeze, send him over to New Japan or to AAA or one of the smaller organizations that WWE wouldn't consider that they're actually in competition with, to get some quote-unquote seasoning and some experience somewhere else, and then when they come back, then they have that extra work under their belt.
Unbelievable. I guess we can use a domestic example as well. Back at around, let's say, 98, 99 with ECW. And, well, probably more along the lines of 97, 98 with WWF and ECW.
Yeah, I was going to use that example, too.
And then, you could look at the worldwide thing with FMW and ECW. The talent trades there, the cross-promotion with those two organizations.
WCW and New Japan had a thing, too.
There you go. Yep. What was it, Clash in Korea? Collision in Korea?
Yeah, I think that's what it was.
Yeah. So the 90s was a fertile place for cross promoting. WWF had the Joshi.
Yep, they had All Japan Women's Aja Kong and
Survivor Series 95,
Dynamite Kansai and stuff coming over. Yep.
Even Royal Rumble, they had Tenryu back in the early 90s.
Yeah, and the thing is that I think in the early 90s,
more than we thought.
Yeah, the early 90s there was still more of a, like, the territory still kind of existed, so companies were kind of still used to cooperating with each other, as opposed to just being direct, violent enemies like they are now from the mid-90s till to this day.
I think it's kind of swinging back around that time period, to be honest.
No, you could be right, because WWE is working with Evolve and things like that, and it seems like they're starting to kind of work with different things to develop guys to come into the organization, but not so much for people who are already there.
Look at Jushin Liger. He swung around for a match.
That's true.
So, onto the subject at hand, would a basic talent swap work?
What do you think? Do you think it's a good idea? I
think it's a great idea. These guys get seasoning. They, the experience. They get to look at different styles, see how they're, done up close. Maybe take in the culture a little bit, become more refined. I think it'd be a great thing. What would it hurt? I could probably see where it would homogenize things a bit, but then again, not really. You get a few more tools into your belt. So that's my take on it.
Well, here's the thing, though. First of all, if we're discussing talent trades or working with other organizations, that's kind of a different thing. I'm all for that. I'm all for if, companies making partnerships with each other and sending a guy in, like, say, the Elite, the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega come in and wrestle the New Day or something like that. I'm okay with, but here's... As far as the actual question of whether they should export people to get them seasoning, like the Tyler Breeze example we mentioned earlier, they shouldn't need to do that because these days they have the Performance Center. They are the number one training company in the World Training Center. It is far and away the most advanced and technologically sound and sophisticated wrestling training center, and they have gone out of their way to employ trainers from all over the world. Robbie Brookside, William Regal, Sho Funaki. They are working with people, so they kind of have brought the rest of the world to them. They don't really need to send wrestlers outside to get that work, and that kind of just reinforces the idea that WWE should be able to teach everything. They're supposed to be the ones who teach you everything else you need to know when you've already gone around the world and done your independent shows.
I agree, but not everybody has that chance to. They may not have the financial means to go overseas. They may not have the financial means to even go, to Mexico or Canada. Even, I mean, when you're wrestling, it's usually expected of you, but, some guys just may not be able to do that financially, and if they're good enough and they get to that place in WWE, maybe they could send them somewhere and they could see something else. They could do something else. Even if you got those guys at that Performance Center, they're just one of each. I mean, they don't equal the sum of the whole. Maybe you want to, you see a bit more than what's at the Performance Center. Maybe they could do something and have a talent swap. Maybe they could bring some guys in. They could, they can get that synergy going between these different organizations around the world and, have a working relationship. They'll still be competitive, but,
Like I said, I'm not against them having working relationships with organizations. It's just a matter of, are we exporting people to get them to improve by having them go work elsewhere? And another problem with that is, when they sign people from Japan and from Mexico and from the independents, they basically try and erase the style that they've built up and bring them into the WWE style. They don't really like people they don't like having different styles of wrestling on their card. They like having, that's great, you did really good with, the Japanese strong style, but we don't do that here.
They want a safer style that's, got to make sure, look at the injuries now. Even the style they work now, they're still getting injured.
Right.
And it's a safer style. So they want to get as much out of these guys for as long as they can year-round with a safer style, and even still they get injured. So it's understandable. I was just watching a Raw from 97 the other day, and they had a 6-man luchador match. Yeah, one of the three. Whee! 2, 4. Anyway, they had a 6-man.
Hip to the hip hop.
You don't stop,
rock,
yeah.
Bang, bang, boogie.
So anyway, they had a 6-man luchador match. I was going to say mask again. No.
Whee!
And it was completely out of place on the card. I'm not saying it was bad, but it was just one of those things where it stuck out like a sore thumb. And, maybe they need that sometimes.
Well, I think that would be a good thing. I think them embracing different styles of match would be good. Because, you take a look at a New Japan card, and there are different styles of matches on a New Japan card. You have your lightweight, fast-paced, high-flying guys. You have your heavyweight style matches with your guys like Tanahashi and Okada. You have we're going to stand in place and headbutt each other in the head until one of us falls over matches with Shibata and Tomohiro Ishii. They do have a mix of styles, but WWE doesn't. And like you mentioned, when they do introduce like a single match on a card that is of a different style, it feels super out of place. That doesn't mean that they can't do that. I think that the crowd just kind of needs to be trained to that. And I also think that is one of the reasons that cruiserweight wrestling never really got over in WWE, is because they weren't willing to let a section of their roster work a completely different style. And when the rare occasions that they did, the audience was so not used to it that it fell flat.
But the other thing,
they didn't want to stick with it to the point where they got warmed up.
But the other thing is they really didn't have the cream of the crop either. They had guys like Scott Putski. I'm not taking anything away from him.
Taka Michinoku, that great Sasuke, for Christ's sake.
Well, they had those guys. Sasuke wasn't there for long.
No, but he could have been.
He could have been, but he didn't sign, so that's why they used Taka over him.
Right.
They ran with Taka as far as they could. Well, what they perceived as far as they could, and then they kind of petered out with it. He could have been around for a long time as a phenomenal talent.
They also reintroduced the Cruiserweight division when there was guys like Dean Malenko and Billy Kidman and Little Guido and Jimmy Yang and Gregory Helms. They had basically WCW's Cruiserweight division by the end
Matt
of that.
Hardy, Jeff Hardy. They had all those guys. Even X-Pac they threw in there at some point, which is a bit odd to say, but yeah.
No, he was Cruiserweight champion in WCW.
And in WWE.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, though. But that's not weird.
It was just kind of weird that so far later on that he was, usually guys get past that stage, and it's not to say that it's a bad division, but it was always looked at as something lesser, which I never quite liked.
Yeah.
But, it's going back to the whole talent swap thing, I think it would be beneficial. It would be beneficial to these guys to kind of observe a different style, possibly work it, and then take it back with him.
I don't know. Like, my big concern is that Tyler Breeze goes to New Japan and does well and learns all these things, and then goes back to WWE and can't use any of them.
Well,
that's
it's better. But you know what? It's better to have it. And,
I guess for when he eventually gets released, but
yeah, and stand out. But Tyler Breeze, that guy should be the next Shawn Michaels. I hope a lot of people feel that way.
That's another discussion for another show. Please. But like I said, it just
Time Warp episode, perhaps.
Maybe
okay.
it made sense back then. I just don't know if it makes sense now with the Performance Center that they have. I just don't know.
Like I said,
what are you going to learn other than like cultural stuff, which you mentioned? But I don't think that's really that important because they don't spend any particular length of time anywhere. What are you going to learn somewhere else? Oh. What are you going to learn in another promotion in another country or in an independent promotion around the U.S. that you're not going to be able to learn in the Performance Center? Like, can you give me an example of something?
I don't know. Discipline, perhaps. I mean, it's very tough to say, but I mean, like, there are advantages no matter where you go. You pick up something, you're never not learning something from somewhere. It's the life of a pro wrestler. There's reasons these guys go to Japan on their own. There's reasons these guys perhaps go to England on their own, to Canada, to Mexico. I mean, look at Hayabusa, one of my favorite wrestlers, Hayabusa, back in the day. But, the companies weren't paying for it. But they would go, they make this excursion.
Right, but that's them going out and doing it on their own. I'm not saying that's not a good thing to do on your own now, just so you're well-versed in wherever you may end up.
But
if you're already there, if you're already at the big stage.
But if the opportunity presents itself and they say, we're going to send you here, would you argue with them?
No, I just don't know the value that they're going to get.
I mean, look at a guy like Al Snow when he went to ECW. It's not quite overseas, but it's the same kind of deal where it's domestic. But he goes to ECW. He was Leif Cassidy, and he goes to ECW, and he has this great shtick come up with Head, and I mean, he blew up, man. He was one of the biggest names in ECW at that time, and then he went back to WWE, and he was very popular. I mean, he may not have been as popular,
but he certainly was more popular.
He was much more popular, and he was there for a good long run. And he was a head trainer on Tough Enough.
Yeah, you're absolutely right for that.
He had a great career after that. Not that his career was,
I guess maybe
he was a very well-rounded wrestler, but he didn't have the personality.
This is all before the Performance Center. This is all before NXT. I just don't know. Like, if that situation happens today, he goes to work some NXT shows and goes to work in the Performance Center. He goes to his promo classes with Regal or whoever, and then comes back. He doesn't need to do. You don't need. WWE doesn't need to export these things anymore because they have everything in house.
Yeah, I think that's the way they're thinking too, but there is definite advantages of it. And, I think they should take advantage of it once in a while, especially if they like a guy. I mean, most times they just release them, let them go, and then they come back later on. I guess it's cheaper that way, but...
And that's the thing, yeah.
But is it really cheaper that way when you're losing out on money?
Well, theoretically, they could probably develop a guy quicker on their own, but then it's a matter of you're sacrificing potentially developing someone else. That time you could be put in to bring up a new guy.
Yeah.
Like I said, I do agree with you that I would rather honestly see Tyler Breeze be allowed to work in places like Evolve or things like that, if it meant that he could get some work in while he's still at his physical peak, instead of just sit in the back playing video games with the New Day. I would much rather see that, but I feel like if you're WWE, if you're looking at it from a business perspective, like you said, it's just we'll release him, and then if when he gets good in a few years, he comes back, and then we have to we have the thing to work with him. Now the interesting one,
can you imagine Enzo Cass in Puerto Rico, rattling up the crowd?
Here's the thing is. The name that might shoot a giant hole in the argument I'm trying to make here is Solomon Crow, Sami Callihan.
There you go. And that's another guy.
Here's a guy who was there. He was signed. He had his deal. He had all of those resources. Still chose of his own volition to leave, to go to work the independent circuit, to potentially go to work
dominating
and
the independent circuit lately.
He has lit that scene on fire.
Rightfully so.
I think, if he sticks around for another year or two, then he is going to come back into WWE with the same fervor maybe not of an AJ Styles, but of somebody of like an Austin Aries.
Well, the door is open to him because he left on good
WWE
terms.
does have basically, or he has more or less an open invitation to come back. So,
yeah, he himself said he
because
left on
of
good
the
terms.
work he has put in that circuit. When he comes back, like I said, it won't be AJ Styles, but it'll probably be around Austin Aries level that he'll have, and he'll certainly be in a better position than he was where he was at when he was in NXT.
He was just kind of there.
Yeah.
And do you foresee him coming back as Solomon Crow, or do you see him coming back as Sami Callihan?
Oh, good question.
Because,
good question.
I mean, look at it this way. Look at the way R-Truth was years ago. They had him as K-Quick. Now they don't even mention that.
Yeah.
So do you see it as a situation like that? Because I could see it being like a situation like that.
I mean, I don't think that they'll reference the character. I don't think that they'll reference him at all, depending on how
Not that it was terrible,
the
but
thing
it's
is,
just,
here's the question, though, is if they bring him back into NXT, then probably they keep the Solomon Crow name. I don't know. If it was a scenario where they're just bringing him right into the main roster, then maybe not. I don't know. WWE does like to rename guys, and since they already have a name in place for him, I could see that. But it also seems like they have gotten away from the we need to rename every guy when they get here mentality that they had 3, 4, 5 years ago, even 2 years ago. So I don't know. That's a toss up, but that's a different subject. I think that's gonna wrap it up though. It's an interesting point. There is certain.
God, I miss Sami Callihan wrestling around here. I really do.
There's certain things that you can get in the independents that you can't get from the Performance Center, but I do think that overall the value of should WWE export people, my final word on it is no.
I say yeah. I mean, there's a lot of advantages to it, and you mentioned the advantages. I mean, look at Sami Callihan, like we mentioned. Mm-hmm. The guy was kind of there in NXT, and then after that, he went out and he's been going through things like a proverbial Tasmanian devil. You look at the way he's working now, and it's the way he worked before, and now he wants to stand out again. Boom, 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 tearing through things, and he'll be back.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to wrap it up for this episode of Change the Questions. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to check out all of our other programs. On Monday, we have Time Warp. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, we have Changing the Question. On Wednesdays, we have Booking About a Wrestler. And on Fridays, we have Let's Play TEW. Also, be sure to check out our website where you will see links to all of our shows, both audio and video, as well as articles that you cannot get anywhere else. Be sure to check out changingtheqs.com, which is changingtheqs.com. Also, if you want to get a hold of us on Twitter, you can use that same handle, @changingtheqs, @changingtheqs. Also, be sure to search for us on Facebook. Just search for Changing the Questions. If you want to send us a good old-fashioned email, you can do that at changingthequestions@gmail.com. That's going to wrap it up for us for this episode. For Mike Miner.
Later, guys.
My name is Paul Port. See you again soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.